faithfully delivering value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today, the book I'm going to interpret for you is a tragedy by the ancient Greek writer Sophocles.
Oedipus the King.
What creature? It walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening. It is most feeble when it has the most legs. I believe everyone has heard the Sphinx's riddle and knows the answer is human. And the origin of this riddle is precisely the ancient Greek tragedy we're discussing today. Oedipus the King is an absolute classic in the history of theater and literature. The Oedipus complex we often refer to, also known as the mother complex, originates from this very play, Oedipus the King. Since its creation in the first half of the 5th century BCE, countless adaptations have been made. Masters of drama throughout history, Seneca of Rome, Corneille of France, Dryden of England, all created tragedies of the same name, though none could rival Sophocles' original. Interpretations by great thinkers like Aristotle, Hegel, Heidegger, and Derrida throughout the ages have continually breathed new life into Oedipus the King. A tragedy over 2,000 years old that still captivates us today certainly possesses enduring charm. First, I'll briefly recount the plot, then explore this masterpiece's significance through lenses of ancient Greek fate, tragedy, religious ethics, and character tragedy. Simply put, this tragedy tells the story of a man's struggle against fate. Oedipus was the son of Laius, king of Thebes. After learning from an oracle that his son would kill him and marry his mother, a horrified Laius pierced the infant's ankles and ordered a servant to abandon him in the mountains. Out of pity, the servant gave the baby to a shepherd who brought him to Corinth's childless king and queen. They adopted Oedipus. Years later, Oedipus accidentally learned through an oracle that he was fated to kill his father and marry his mother. Mistaking his adoptive parents for his biological ones, he resolutely fled home to avoid this fate, swearing never to return. Yet, through cruel twists of fate, Oedipus journeyed to his birthplace Thebes. At a crossroads, he encountered an old man, quarreled, and struck him dead. Unaware the old man was his birth father, Laius. Afterwards, Oedipus encountered the Sphinx, a lion-bodied, human-faced monster, at the gate of Thebes. This monster killed many people with a riddle. The riddle question was, what creature walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 legs at noon, and 3 legs in the evening? We mentioned it earlier. Oedipus quickly guessed the answer, human, and lifted Thebes' disaster. Thus, he was hailed as king by the people and married the widowed queen Jocasta, who was actually his birth mother. Thus, the prophecy of killing his father and marrying his mother was fulfilled. Yet Oedipus himself was completely unaware. Several years later, a plague ravaged Thebes. A prophet said that the gods had sent the disaster because the murderer of the old king was still at large.
Therefore, the murderer must be found and banished to lift the calamity.
By then, Oedipus had been on the throne for 16 years. To save the city, he went to great lengths to hunt down the culprit, only to discover that the perpetrator was himself. The old king was actually his father. The queen was his mother. When the truth came out, his mother Jocasta, overwhelmed with shame, took her own life.
Oedipus, in unbearable pain, blinded himself and went into exile.
On a stormy day, Oedipus wandered to Colonus and resolutely entered the underworld, ending his tragic life. Such a tragic ending is truly shocking to readers. In terms of form, the entire tragedy is full of twists and turns, with a structure considered perfect, thus hailed by Aristotle as the perfect model of tragic art. The original Greek meaning of tragedy is Song of the Goats, a ritual in the worship of Dionysus, where a chorus of 50 men, dressed as goats, sang about the sufferings of Dionysus on earth, hence also called dithyramb. In 569 BCE, the worship of Dionysus moved from the countryside to the city. Under the promotion of the Athenian government, it became a national festival, thriving greatly. The content expanded to include other Greek heroes and legends, gradually giving rise to tragedy. This art form produced three great tragic playwrights: Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. At that time, Athens even built a theater that could hold 3,000 people. Every year in March and April, a 6-day Dionysia festival was held, with 3 days dedicated to tragedy competitions. The first thing, it is said that Sophocles won 24 times in tragedy competitions.
Among the three great tragic playwrights, he ranks first. He created 123 plays in his lifetime, but unfortunately only 7 tragedies are fully preserved, along with fragments of 80 or 90 plays. Sophocles propelled the maturity of Greek tragedy.
For example, he broke through the trilogy form pioneered by Aeschylus. Instead of telling 3 separate stories, he used one play to narrate a complete story, making conflicts more concentrated and the plot and structure more refined. In terms of theme, Aeschylus represented hero tragedies with Prometheus Bound, while Sophocles expanded it to Oedipus the King. Such fate tragedies represent the pinnacle of ancient Greek tragedy, and thus Sophocles is known as the father of fate tragedies. The so-called fate tragedy refers to the hopeless struggle between humans and gods. Oedipus was full of wisdom, brave and resolute, a respected monarch. However, even such a chosen one had to endure such a tragic fate. All this stems from the ancient Greeks' view of fate, where human destiny is governed by irresistible, mysterious forces. The ancient Greeks had a tradition of consulting oracles, whether for major or minor matters like religion, war, dream interpretation, or childbirth. They were accustomed to predicting divine will through prophets, priests, or other intermediaries. In ancient Greek literary works, we can often find traces of oracles. For example, Herodotus's famous work Histories is directly structured around 4 oracle stories. And among the existing 33 ancient Greek tragedy works, the vast majority also adopted the form of oracle prophecies or curses. Oracles prophesied the fate of the inquirers, foreshadowed the direction of tragedies, and possessed unique narrative and aesthetic functions. In Oedipus the King, oracles appear 3 times, and the entire tragedy unfolds around the fulfillment of these 3 oracles. Following the story's chronological order, first, the old king received an oracle. Laius went to the temple to pray for a son, learned the oracle that his son would kill him and marry his mother, so he abandoned the infant in the wilderness. But Oedipus did not die. And so, next, Oedipus received an oracle. As an adult, Oedipus accidentally heard a drunken minister at a banquet call him an impostor son. So he went to the temple to inquire about his origins, learned the oracle that he was destined to commit the crimes of patricide and incest, then left home to try and escape fate's trap. But instead, he unintentionally killed his father and married his mother. The prophecy was fulfilled, and the last to occur was the oracle to find the source of the plague.
Several years later, a plague ravaged Thebes. Oedipus sought an oracle and learned that only by finding the murderer of the former king would the plague stop.
Guided by the oracle, Oedipus exhausted all efforts to hunt the culprit, only to discover the murderer was himself. He then blinded himself, abdicated, and went into exile. These 3 oracles guided the entire story, steering the characters' fates.
Both Laius and his wife, as well as Oedipus, showed extreme fear and terror upon learning the oracle of patricide and incest.
The couple abandoned their child, and Oedipus left Corinth. They tried hard to resist the oracle, but, through twists of fate, returned to the path predetermined by destiny. British philosopher Karl Popper proposed a socio-psychological concept based on this, the Oedipus effect, meaning the prediction itself can influence the predicted event. Moreover, Oedipus's tragic life is hidden in his name. In Greek, Oedipus is a pun, meaning both swollen-footed and he who knows the riddle about feet. This predetermined Oedipus's life marked by swollen feet, solving the Sphinx's riddle to ascend Thebes' throne, then exiled blind. In summary, Oedipus's struggle against fate ended in failure.
To some extent, the emergence of fate tragedies is closely tied to Greece's civilization process.
Freud once said that before civilization emerged, human freedom was highest, while civilization's development restricted freedom and justice, requiring constraints for all. The pain of oppression by Greek democratic political civilization needed alleviation through tragic art. In Nietzsche's words, it was to experience the most intense and exquisite pain. Using the chorus to comfort oneself, how does that bring comfort? Note that while humans ultimately can't defy God-ordained fate, in tragedy, human dignity is as crucial as fate. The essence of tragedy lies in revealing humanity's inner strength. Thus, the more tragic and horrifying the protagonist's fate, the more intense the audience's emotions, and the more thorough the catharsis. The tension between a noble character and cold fate evokes pity and sympathy, inspiring a sense of the sublime. Believing in fate while respecting human freedom and will, this is precisely the ideological hallmark of ancient Greece's democratic flourishing period that Oedipus the king embodies. This is why Greek authorities place such importance on drama's role in promoting democratic ideas, hence funding theater festivals and even providing attendance subsidies. The social context of Sophocles' work. Actually, beyond this democratic politics, there's also a religious ethical dimension. This is another perspective for understanding the fate tragedy of Oedipus. For example, the ethical tragedy behind the exile of Oedipus the king. Right from the start, Oedipus the king presents a divinely sent plague, people suffering, wheat withering in fields, cattle dying in pastures, women miscarrying. The most detestable plague god descended upon the city-state. Pestilence raged, bringing it to the brink of destruction. How can this be eliminated?
There's only one solution: exile the scapegoat.
To eliminate the plague and save Thebes, the murderer of the former king must be found and purged like pollution. And this scapegoat was Oedipus himself. When Oedipus first appears, his majestic countenance bears an almost sacred expression, revealing the scapegoat image. When suppliants approach the altar with reverence, as if before a shrine, begging for deliverance from the plague, Oedipus replies, "I understand your suffering, but each of you grieves only for yourselves, not others. My sorrow is for the city-state, myself, and also for you." During the investigation, Oedipus also says, "As long as it saves the city-state, nothing else matters." Oedipus lived mostly in exile, cursed at birth with patricide and incest, abandoned by parents, exiled to a neighboring country, finally burdened as the criminal causing plague and incest. He exiled himself from Thebes. Even during his years in Thebes, he bore the identity of an illegitimate usurper. Truly, Oedipus's entire life was that of an exiled scapegoat. In ancient times, when communities faced uncontrollable disasters, they often selected an animal or person as scapegoat to banish for collective atonement. Atonement! In Athens, during the Thargelia harvest festival each May, a male and female scapegoat were chosen, driven from the city, sometimes stoned to death. These scapegoats were selected from society's lowest strata or criminals, people deemed expendable. The renowned British anthropologist Fraser detailed similar scapegoat exile rituals in his magnum opus, The Golden Bough. French scholar René Girard believed the scapegoat mechanism is essentially an operation of collective violence to ensure collective interests. Yet, Oedipus was also a revered demigod king who solved the Sphinx's riddle that even gods couldn't crack, becoming the city's savior, praised by his subjects. "O mighty sovereign!" Even after the patricide was revealed, the chorus still called him "my king," treating him as a messiah. Oedipus embodies both the exiled scapegoat and the demigod king, two contradictory images unified in one person. French scholar Jean-Pierre Vernant explained, "Both king and scapegoat are individuals responsible for saving the public, bearing the entire community's burdens and sins.
But why?
In ancient Greek culture, the fertility of land, livestock, and women all depended on the king. A valiant king brought prosperity. An evil king brought calamity upon the whole city. When God sent disasters upon a people, it meant the kingship was tainted. The normal solution was sacrificing and punishing the king, allowing the community to cleanse itself. To appease divine wrath through banishment, thus Oedipus the king was exiled. There's also historical basis. Athens' 5th century BCE ostracism practice, where citizens wrote names on pottery shards to vote out potential tyrants, threatening democracy. Those exiled could be unpopular figures or highly respected sages. In this play, the oracle functions like those pottery shards, revealing who must be exiled. Through ostracism, we can interpret Oedipus's tragedy as the suffering of the wise. The suffering sage is a classic literary theme, like Odysseus in the Odyssey, wandering 10 years through storms, cyclopes, sirens, and lightning before returning home.
So why do sages suffer?
Because sages represent humanity's highest ideals and rationality. In ancient Greece, when sages used wisdom to challenge divine authority or mainstream values, defying natural or social laws, they were inevitably punished. In Oedipus the King, solving the Sphinx's riddle relied entirely on wisdom. Hegel said this riddle calls for know myself. This enigma stumped not only passers-by, but even Apollo's own prophets. Only Oedipus solved the Sphinx's riddle, securing his place in history alongside heroes like Heracles. But this also negated prophets and divine aid, signifying human wisdom triumphing over gods. Oedipus was elected king by Theban people, and he gladly accepted the throne, increasingly valuing his own wisdom. Before and during his reign, kings devoutly worshipped gods, seeking divine guidance for matters often influenced by oracles or prophets. But Oedipus, conqueror of the Sphinx, gradually became arrogant, neither praying to gods nor consulting oracles, instead relying solely on wisdom to govern rationally. Under his rule, Thebes enjoyed years of prosperity, with people praising him as exceptionally wise and greatly contributing to the city-state. Oedipus's attitude toward prophets grew increasingly contemptuous. He cursed the blind prophet Tiresias as a sanctimonious, spell-flaunting rogue. Demanding, he said, "Hey, tell me, when have you ever proved yourself a prophet? When that corpse-bearing dog was here, why didn't you speak or save the people?"
Similarly, Jocasta, Oedipus's birth mother and wife, also held skeptical views toward prophets.
Jocasta was originally pious, but after sacrificing her infant due to an oracle yet failing to save her husband, she believed divine signs couldn't alter fate. So she stopped wavering over prophecies. In conversations with Oedipus, she subtly revealed atheistic views. Prophets' words come to nothing, don't heed them. Chance controls our unseen future, my fear it.
Yet in ancient Greece, divine will was inviolable.
Greek philosopher Heraclitus stated, "All human laws are nourished by the one divine law." Statesman Pericles also noted, "Failing to uphold such divine laws inevitably brings public disgrace." In Oedipus the King, the chorus proclaims, "The gods draw strength from these laws
To achieve immortality.
In Greek tragedy, the chorus comprised elders with supreme authority, so their views represented the entire tribe. If anyone fears not justice, disrespects gods, and acts arrogantly, may doom seize them. During Greece's Enlightenment, divine power was gradually diminished by knowledge. The wise Oedipus governed through wisdom and knowledge, yet these very strengths blinded him to lurking dangers. Can humans truly defy divine will? Human knowledge, in a sense, reveals ignorance, just as Oedipus was inescapably doomed. Thus, know thyself and never scorn or blaspheme the gods. In a way, Sophocles used Oedipus's tragedy to reject knowledge, restore divine power, and warn humanity. Some scholars argue Oedipus the King is less about religion and more about ethics. The link between Oedipus's regicide, patricide, incest, and his tragic fate forms this play's ethical core.
First, regicide. In ancient tribal societies, killing kings wasn't rare.
Fraser's Golden Bough opens with an ancient Italian regicide ritual. A challenger breaks a sacred branch, duels the king to death, and takes the throne. Oedipus mirrors this ritual. Under the Sphinx's threat, the city-state teetered on collapse. King Laius proved powerless, but Oedipus, young, strong, wise, saved the city from chaos and rightfully claimed the throne. Thus, Oedipus embodied duality, a wise savior king and a regicidal usurper. Sophocles himself detested tyrannical rule. Though he mingled with sophists, he upheld moderate democracy and conservative religion. He refused invitations from Macedonian kings and Sicilian tyrants, declaring, "Who enters a king's court becomes a slave, however free they arrive." In masterpieces like Electra and Antigone, Sophocles attacked tyrants, alluding to contemporary despots. Through Oedipus's harsh punishment, he condemned tyranny.
Now consider patricide and incest, horrifying to us, yet common in Greek myths.
The first sky god Uranus was overthrown by son Cronus, who was toppled by son Zeus. Zeus and Hera were both siblings and spouses. In the 20th century, psychoanalysis master Freud analyzed patricide and incest psychologically, proposing a crucial psychological concept: the Oedipus complex, also known as the mother complex. Freud pointed out, perhaps all our destinies involve directing our first sexual impulses toward our mothers, and our earliest hatred and murderous desires toward our fathers. In his view, Oedipus killing his father and marrying his mother was simply the fulfillment of childhood primal desires. For example, when Oedipus anxiously feared committing these crimes, Jocasta comforted him. Many men have dreamed of marrying mothers. Those who don't dwell on it live peacefully. However, when Sophocles created Oedipus the king, Greece had entered the slave-owning era. Blood marriage, marriage between close blood relatives, was seen as incest, a profound taboo.
Oedipus, patricide, and incest violated fundamental blood ethics, disrupting both family order and the city-state's laws.
Without clear distinctions between spouses, parents, children, and siblings, orderly succession becomes impossible. Chaos reigns in the city-state. Oedipus couldn't forgive his incestuous sin.
He said, "If I reach the underworld with sight intact, what eyes could I use to face my father and wretched mother?" Thus he atoned through self-blinding.
Further, Oedipus's self-exile represented submission to fate, restoring divine authority. Though Oedipus committed regicide, patricide, and incest, he had multiple chances to stop the tragedy. Had he heeded advice not to pursue the truth, or not exposed his origins and crimes, could disaster have been avoided? Why then did Oedipus so stubbornly hunt the truth, dooming himself utterly? This leads us to character tragedy. While Shakespeare epitomizes character tragedy, Sophocles, 2 millennia earlier, made personality the driving force of tragedy.
Oedipus' character is profoundly complex, high responsibility and justice, yet also arrogance and obstinacy.
As the tragedy opens with plague raging, Oedipus speaks passionately and righteously. He declares, "Person's greatest undertaking is to help others with all their ability and resources." During the investigation of the murderer, almost everyone kindly tried to dissuade or warn him. Jocasta repeatedly reminded him, "Unfortunate man, you don't know your own origins." But Oedipus was extremely arrogant. He insisted on getting to the bottom of things and firmly believed he wasn't foolish and would never commit incest. This cognitive bias caused Oedipus to selectively ignore all the signs. When Jocasta mentioned the oracle about the old king abandoning the baby, Oedipus became deeply unsettled and terrified. When he kept asking about the old king's appearance and the murder location, he subconsciously believed he was the killer and was filled with extreme dread. When the messenger mentioned the ankle, Oedipus immediately lashed out angrily.
"Oh, why are you bringing up this old wound?"
All signs show that Oedipus chose self-deception amid extreme distress. He visited the Delphi temple many times to seek divine signs, but never noticed the inscription, "Know thyself." He solved the Sphinx's riddle, but never examined or understood himself. In this sense, Oedipus's tragedy is one of self-awareness. Oedipus also had a hot-tempered, reckless side. When the prophet Tiresias accused him of murder, Oedipus raged and cursed him as blind, deaf, and ignorant, only for the prophet to retort, "You pitiful creature who only knows how to curse." With Creon, Oedipus baselessly suspected and falsely accused him of envying power and plotting treason. Creon angrily rebuked him. "You're fierce when angry and gloomy when yielding. This disposition causes you the most suffering." Oh, and Creon's accusation was indeed spot on. Let's return to the suspenseful opening of Oedipus the King. Who is the culprit behind the plague?
The plague investigation led to tracing Oedipus's origins, shifting the conflict from the city's disaster to Oedipus's personal downfall.
During the hunt for the killer, 5 people took turns. Under layered questioning, the complex truth unraveled. Oedipus realized he was the murderer of the former king and the cause of the plague. The all-knowing king instantly fell from grace, transformed into a man rejected by the gods, bearing all the world's shame. The shock from this plot twist is absolutely breathtaking. Aristotle said in Poetics, "Oedipus's discovery of truth is the masterpiece of all tragedies because the best discovery coincides with reversal." Audiences experience both the rational process of discovery and the emotional shock of reversal, instantly feeling fear and pity. This pioneering flashback technique masterfully uses suspense and reversal, hailed by Aristotle as the perfect tragedy. Sophocles lived from 496 to 306 BCE. Almost simultaneously with the decline of Athenian democracy, Greek tragedy faded. Athenian democracy propelled Greek drama's growth, while drama, conversely, shaped democratic development. Over 2 millennia later, this classic fate tragedy still profoundly shakes our souls. Since 1935, Luo Nianshang's renowned translation of Oedipus the King, published by Commercial Press, has been reprinted continuously, offering Chinese readers transformative spiritual washlay, spiritual baptism. As British critic F.L. Lucas noted, the eternal irony of human tragedy is repeatedly plotting self-destruction or destroying what we love. For Oedipus, fate was a closed world with predetermined outcomes. Every effort led to the same end. Tragedy was unavoidable. Even today, Oedipus's fate tragedy fills humanity with dread, as the play declares, "Call no mortal happy until he crosses life's boundary free from pain." That concludes our interpretation of Sophocles' Oedipus the King. Reading notes are below the audio. See you next time.